Hi there, my name is Kira, and today I'm going to be showing you how to crochet these absolutely adorable little bunnies. This pattern is low sew and it works up super quickly, and I think it's just absolutely adorable for this spring. If you're a beginner, check out the videos I have linked down below with tutorials for a magic ring and some of the other basic stitches that I'll be using in today's pattern, and let's go ahead and get started. For supplies, you'll need a pair of scissors, a 5mm crochet hook, a stitch marker and an embroidery needle, 20mm safety eyes, and some polyfill stuffing. For yarn today, I'll be using Premier Parfait Chunky in the color Teddy Bear, and you'll just need a scrap piece of white and pink plush yarn. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is make the little feet, the back feet. So I just have my brown yarn here, and I'm gonna start by making 6 single crochet into a magic ring. For the next round, I'm going to do 1 single crochet and then 2 increase stitches and repeat that 2 times to go all the way around. So 1 single crochet and then 2 increase stitches. And then I'm just going to do that one more time. And then I'm going to go ahead and place my stitch marker, and just for reference, I like to keep my stitch marker in the last stitch of every round rather than the first stitch of every round. For the next 2 rounds, I'm just going to do 2 rounds of 10 single crochet a round. For the next round, I'm going to do 3 single crochet and a decrease stitch 2 times. So 1, 2, and 3 single crochet, and then a decrease stitch. And then I'm just going to do that one more time. For the next round, I'm going to do 2 single crochet and then a decrease stitch and repeat that 2 times to go all the way around. So 1, and then 2 single crochet and a decrease stitch. And then I'm just going to do that one more time. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of stuffing into the foot. You don't need a whole lot, just enough to kind of fill it out. Okay. And then to finish this off, I'm just going to kind of close these ends together, and I'm going to make 3 single crochet through both sides. So I'm just going through both sides of the foot. There's 1. 2, and 3, and then you can go ahead and tie off your yarn, but you do want to leave a little bit of a tail so that we can sew this onto the body later. Okay, so here is one of my little back feet, and once you have one of these done, you want to go ahead and repeat these same steps again to make a second back foot. And then we can go ahead and just set these aside for now, and we'll come back to them once we get finished with the body. Okay, next we're gonna get started on one of the front legs. So these ones are gonna be a little bit different than the back legs. And the first thing I'm gonna do is just make 6 single crochet in a magic ring. For the next round, I'm gonna make 6 increase stitches. And an increase stitch is just 2 single crochet into the same stitch. For the next round, I'm gonna make 1 single crochet in an increase stitch and repeat that 6 times to go all the way around. So 1 single crochet and then an increase. And then I'm gonna do that 5 more times. For the next round, I'm just gonna do 18 single crochet around. For the next round, I'm gonna make 6 decrease stitches and then 6 single crochet. So 6 decrease stitches. There's 1. And then I'm just going to finish off the round with 6 single crochet. Okay, and then for the next 6 rounds, I'm gonna do 6 rounds of 12 single crochet around. And for time's sake, I'm gonna go ahead and do these rounds off camera. But again, you're gonna do 6 rounds of 12 single crochet around. And I'll be right back to show you what to do next. Okay, so I just finished my 6 rounds of 12 single crochet around. And I'm gonna go ahead and tie off my yarn. You do not really need to worry about leaving much of a tail. And then I'm gonna also go ahead and add some stuffing into here. And then once you have one of your kind of front legs done, you wanna go ahead and repeat those steps again to make a second front leg. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and set these aside and we will come back to them once we get started on the body. The next piece we're gonna make here is the bunny's hip. And for the hip, the first thing you want to do is make a slip knot on your hook and chain 5. And then starting in this second stitch from my hook, so you can see I have this 1 and 2. So starting in this stitch here, I'm going to make 3 single crochet. And then I'm going to make 3 single crochet in 1. So 3 single crochet all into this 1 stitch. So there's 1. And then again into that same stitch, there's 2, and one more time into the same stitch, there's 3. And then I'm going to turn my chain over, so now I'm looking at the other side of my chain, and I'm going to make 3 single crochet into the other side of these chain stitches. So there's 1, 2, and 3. And then this stitch right here is the chain stitch that we skipped at the beginning. And into that stitch, I'm going to make another 3 single crochet in 1. So 3 single crochet all into that very first chain stitch that we skipped at the beginning. Just like that. And then into this next stitch here, this was the first single crochet that we made on our chain. I'm just going to go and make a slip stitch in this stitch to kind of secure this around. So now we have kind of a base foundation chain that gives us a little bit of an oval shape. And I'm going to go ahead and place my stitch marker into this last stitch that we just made. And then for the next round, I'm just going to make 1 single crochet and an increase stitch 6 times to go all the way around. So 1 single crochet and then an increase stitch. And then I'm going to do that 5 more times. For the next round, I'm going to start by making 2 single crochet. And then I'm going to make 6 increase stitches, and you want to make sure that these increase stitches are kind of centered on top of your chain that we made. So like they should be going across the top of this oval shape. So I'm going to do my 6 increases. And then I'm just going to finish off the round with 10 more single crochet. For the next round, I'm going to start by making 18 single crochet. And then I'm going to finish off the round with 6 slip stitches. And then for the last round, we're just going to do 24 single crochet around. Alright, and then you can go ahead and tie off your yarn. You don't need to worry about leaving a tail or anything like that. These will be crocheted into the body. And then just for reference real quick, the part of the hip where your tail is right here, this is going to be the bottom of the hip, which you'll need to know that later on. So just keep that in mind. This right here where your tail is the bottom of the hip. And once you have one hip done, you want to go ahead and repeat those steps again to make a second hip. And then we can go ahead and just set these aside, and we will come back to them once we get started working on the body. Next, we're going to make the bunny's tail. And to make the tail, I'm just going to start by making 6 single crochet into a magic ring. And then for the next round, I'm going to make 6 increase stitches. And then for the next round, I'm going to make 12 single crochet around. for the next round, I'm going to go ahead and do 6 decrease stitches. And then I'm just going to add the tiniest little bit of stuffing into here. And then to finish off the tail, I'm just going to close these 2 ends together and then make 3 single crochet through both sides. So there's 1, 2, and 3. And then you can go ahead and tie off your yarn, and you don't need to worry about leaving a tail. And then I'm just going to go ahead and set this aside as well. And we have one more little thing to make before we get started on the actual bunny. So the last thing we're going to do before we get started on the body and the head is make the ears. So I'm just going to start by making a slip knot on my hook. And for this slip knot, you do want to leave a pretty good sized tail on the end of your slip knot. And we'll use this later to help keep the ears standing up. So you can see I just have a little tail on my slip knot. And these are very similar to how we did the hips. So I'm going to chain 6. And then starting in that second stitch from my hook, so skipping 1, and into that second stitch I'm going to make 4 single crochet. And then into this next stitch, I'm going to make 3 single crochet all into the same stitch. So 1, 2, and then again into that same stitch, there's 3. And then I'm going to kind of turn my chain over and repeat the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to make 4 single crochet. And then into this chain stitch that we initially skipped at the beginning, I'm going to make another 3 single crochet in 1. And then just into that first single crochet that we made, I'm going to make a slip stitch. And then I'm going to go ahead and place my stitch marker in that stitch. And for the next round, I'm going to do 1 single crochet and then an increase stitch and repeat that 7 times to go around. So 1 single crochet and then an increase stitch. And then I'm going to do that 6 more times. For the next round, I'm going to start by making 5 single crochet. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I'm going to make 4 increase stitches. And again, these increases should be at the top of your oval shape. Like, you don't want them to be over here on the side. They should be up here on the top of your oval. And if they're not, feel free to make adjustments as needed to make sure that they are in the right spot. So I'm just going to do 4 increases. And then I'm going to make 7 single crochet. And then I'm going to make 1 decrease stitch. And in this next stitch, I'm gonna do 3 single crochet in one. So again, just 3 single crochet into the same stitch. And then I'm just gonna finish off this round with another decrease stitch. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and make 25 single crochet around. And then lastly, this here is the top of the ear, and I'm just gonna make probably about 8 slip stitches down the side of the ear just to get my yarn tail to the bottom of the ear so it's easier to hide it when we're crocheting the ears into the body. So again, I'm just gonna make about 8 slip stitches to move this tail down. And then you can go ahead and tie off your yarn. And then here is one of my ears all finished. And once you have one ear done, you want to go ahead and repeat those steps again to make a second ear. And then again, I'm just going to go ahead and set these aside for now, and we'll come back to them once we get started working on the head. So to get started on the body, I'm just going to start by making 8 single crochet into a magic ring. And then for the next round, I'm going to do 8 increase stitches. And then for the next round, I'm going to do 1 single crochet and an increase stitch and repeat that 8 times to go all the way around. So 1 single crochet and then an increase stitch. And then I'm just going to repeat that 7 more times. And then for the next round, I'm going to do 3 single crochet and an increase stitch and repeat that 6 times to go all the way around. So 1, 2, 3 single crochet and then an increase stitch. And then I'm going to do that 5 more times. And then in this next round, we're going to be crocheting the hips into the body. So I'm just going to start by making 4 single crochet. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I'm going to grab one of my hips. And if you remember, I said the spot here where your tail was on the hip is the bottom of the hip. So these next 6 stitches are what I'm going to be crocheting through onto the body to connect this to the body. So just, you can see I have my hip, And I'm going to flip that over, so I'm looking at this tail that's on the inside from my slip knot. And then on my body, I have my pretty side facing up, so the tail for my magic ring is on the bottom. And I'm going to take them just like this and line them up with each other. And then for the next 6 stitches, I'm going to go through a stitch on the body and on the hip. And like I said, it's really important to make sure that on the hip you're going through those 6 stitches that are centered at the bottom of the hip. So I'm going to go through a stitch on my body, the next stitch on my body, and the first stitch on my hip. And then just make a single crochet through both of those pieces. And then I'm going to do 5 more of those. So this is 2. And I'm just going through a stitch from the hip and a stitch from the body. There's 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then I'm going to make 9 single crochet. And then we're going to attach the other hip the same way. So I have my other hip, and again, the tail on my hip right here is the bottom. This is the bottom of the hip. So I'm going to find these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches that are centered at the bottom and line them up with my body the exact same way as we did before. So the sides with the tails sticking out are going to be touching each other. And then just like before, I'm going to go through the next 6 stitches on both the body and the hip to connect them. And then I'm just going to finish off the round by making 5 more single crochet. Alrighty, and then after that round, you should have something that looks like this. So I have the bottom of my body here, and then I have both my hips on the sides of the body. And what we're going to be doing, so this will be the back of the body here, and the only reason I know that is because that's where my yarn is attached right now. We're going to make a panel that connects to both of the hips and kind of works its way up to make the back of the body. And then later on we'll come back and do another panel up front to make the front of the body, but that one's going to be a little bit different than the back. So let's just go ahead and we're going to get started on making the back. So the first thing I'm going to do is just make 4 single crochet. And then into my hip here. This is the next stitch on my hip right here that we haven't already worked in. So into that stitch, I'm going to take my hook and go right into that next stitch on my hip. And make a slip stitch. And then I'm just going to turn my work over, and you can go ahead and take out your stitch marker. We're going to be working back and forth in rows instead of working in rounds on the back of the body here. And that slip stitch that we just made is going to act kind of as like a chain 1 before we turn our work. So for this next row, I'm going to skip that first slip stitch that we just made and go into my second stitch here. So starting in that second stitch from my hook, I'm just going to make 9 single crochet. So 9 single crochet, and then again on my other hip over here, I'm going to go into that next open stitch on the hip and make a slip stitch, and then turn my work over. And then in this next row here, we're going to be adding the tail into the body as we crochet. So again, I'm going to skip that first stitch, and starting in the second stitch from my hook, I'm going to make 3 single crochet. And then I'm going to grab my tail, and I'm going to make 3 single crochet through both the tail and the back of the body that we're working on. So I'm just going to go through 1 stitch for my tail and 1 stitch from the body, and there's 1 single crochet. Two and 3. And then to finish this row, I'm just going to make another 3 single crochet. And finish it off with another slip stitch in the next stitch on my hip. So we're just going to kind of work up and across these hips until it's all filled in. So there's my slip stitch, and then I'm going to turn my work again. And like I said, we're just going to repeat this process several times. So for the next 9 rows, I'm going to continue to repeat this pattern of making 9 single crochet, slip stitching into my hip, and then turning my work and repeating it over and over again. So we're going to do 9 rows of that, and I'll go through this next one with you. So again, starting in the second stitch from your hook, I'm going to do 9 single crochet. And then slip stitch into the hip. And then I'm going to turn and repeat this again. So that was 1 time, and we want to do 9 rows of that. So I'm going to go ahead and do 8 more rows of my 9 single crochet across, slip stitch into the hip, turn my work, and then repeat it again. After you have your 9 rows of single crochet done, it should look something like this. I'm going to place my stitch marker in this stitch here right next to where we just left off, because this later will become the last stitch of the round. And in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and cut this yarn because we'll need it for the belly, but I'm not going to tie it off. So I'm just going to kind of cut this and leave it here, and we'll come back to it. And then with this little tail that I have here, this is coming from the tail that we crocheted into the back of the body. This is completely optional, but I'm going to take this tail and really quickly just thread it onto my embroidery needle and kind of go from the inside of the body out back here, and I'm just gonna go through a stitch on my tail. And then go back onto the inside of the body just to kind of push the tail upwards so it's sitting up on the body. And like I said, completely optional. And then you can just tie off your yarn. Okay, so now we're gonna move to the front part of the body here and make the belly. And for the belly, what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna take my yarn and make a slip knot on my hook. And you wanna leave a pretty long tail on your slip knot. So I have a pretty long tail here that I'm gonna leave on the end of my slip knot. And so I just have the front of the body facing me, and I'm gonna insert my hook into this first stitch here on the side of my right hip. So you can see this stitch was the stitch we used to attach the hip to the body, and I'm just going in right next to that. And then for this one, this is gonna be a little bit different than what we did for the back of the body. I'm gonna start by just making 9 single crochet. And then I'm gonna chain 1 and turn this over. And I'm gonna do this 5 more times. So you wanna have 6 rows total of 9 single crochet. That was 1. So then again, starting in that second stitch for my hook, I'm gonna do another 9 single crochet. So there's 2 rows, and then I'm gonna chain 1 and turn. And I'm going to continue to do this until I've done 6 total rows of 9 single crochet. So I'm going to do 4 more. Okay, so I just finished my 6 rows of 9 single crochet. And then for the last row of my belly, I'm going to do 1 single crochet in a decreased stitch 3 times. So 1 single crochet and then a decreased stitch. And then I'm going to do that 2 more times. What I'm going to do next, I'm going to attach the belly piece to the hip, but rather than attaching it like this, where it's kind of smooth here, I'm going to take both of these and fold them inwards, like that, so they're kind of lined up. And we're going to crochet down the side of these pieces so that from the front, this hip has, there's like a divot in between the hip and the belly. So before we do that, what I'm going to do is count 6 stitches from the bottom of my hip where it's attached to the body. So these next 6 stitches, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And feel free to use a stitch marker to mark that stitch there. And like I said, I'm going to kind of turn this inside out. So that this part is a little bit easier. So again, I have the back of my body over here with the tail, both of my hips and the belly piece. And with my hook on that yarn where we just finished making our rows, I'm just gonna line these 2 pieces up here like that. So we're looking at the inside of the body. I've turned this inside out. And I have my hip here, and then my belly here. And starting in this 6th stitch that we counted, I'm gonna go into that stitch with my hook and into that belly, the side of that belly. And I'm going to make 6 single crochet through both of these pieces going down towards the base of the body. So there's 2. 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then you can go ahead and just tie off this yarn. So you can see when I'm looking at this from the front, there's kind of that little divot there in between my hip and my body, which is just gonna, or my belly, which is just gonna shape the body a little bit more. And then we are gonna repeat this again on the other side, except for instead of working from the hip down, we're gonna work from the bottom of the body and crochet up the exact same way. So again, this is still inside out. I have the tail on the inside of my body, and I'm just gonna match up the side of my hip with my belly. And then using this long tail that we left on the slip knot when we first started the belly, I'm going to go into this next stitch on my hip and into the body, and then use that tail to pull up and make a slip stitch. And then I'm just going to make 5 more single crochet through both the hip and the belly. And then you can go ahead and tie off this yarn. Okay, so I know that part was really confusing. I'm going to go ahead and flip this back to right side out. And just kind of tuck all these little tails in to get them out of the way. Okay, so you should have something that looks like this. I have my belly here with both my hips. This is what the bottom looks like. And then in the back of my body, I have my tail and my yarn that we did not tie off in the back. And if this part here where you crocheted the hips to the belly, if that's confusing for you, you can totally just sew them together. Just make sure you do it from the inside. So now I'm going to come back over to where we have our yarn that we cut but did not tie off on the back of the body here. And we're going to be working in rounds. So we're going to go back to crocheting all the way around on the body. And if you remember, the last thing we did over here was that slip stitch into the hip. And just for this one round, we're going to skip that stitch and go into the next stitch. And that'll be the first stitch of this next round. So going into that stitch, I'm just going to start by making 9 single crochet. And I've already put my stitch marker here because I know this is going to be the last stitch of the round, and that just helps me. And then since we cut our yarn, I'm just going to reattach my yarn in this stitch here. And then for the rest of the round, we're going to do 2 single crochet, a decrease stitch, and another 2 single crochet 3 times. So we're going to do that once on the hip, once on the belly, and once on the other hip over here. So I'm just going to do 2 single crochet, moving on to my hip now, and then a decrease stitch, and another 2 single crochet, and then we're going to repeat that again on the belly. So moving into my next stitch on the top of the belly, I'm going to do 1 and 2 single crochet, and then a decrease stitch, and then another 2 single crochet, and then one more time on my other hip over here, I'm going to go into the next stitch on my hip and do 2 single crochet. So there's 1 and 2, and then a decrease stitch. And then finish off this round with 2 more single crochet. Okay, so for the rest of the body and the head, we're just going to continue to work around. In this next round, we're going to be attaching our front legs. Before we do that, the first thing I'm going to do is just make 13 single crochet. And then I'm going to grab my first kind of front leg, and I'm going to line this up so that the back of my leg, you can see the foot kind of comes out here. This is the front of the foot. So I'm just going to have the back of this line up with my body. And in the next 3 stitches, I'm going to go through a stitch from the leg, the back of this leg, and a stitch from the body, and crochet the leg into the body. So these 3 stitches for me are the ones that are kind of in the center of the back of this front leg. So those are the 3 stitches I'm going to go through, but you just want to make sure that we're attaching essentially these 2 parts. So the rest of this will be just kind of sitting here for now. So again, going into a stitch for my leg, and then into the next stitch on my body, and I'm going to do 3 single crochet like this. So there's 1, and then again going through both of those stitches, 2 and 3, and then I'm just going to make 1 single crochet, and then I'm going to grab my other front leg and repeat the exact same thing to attach it. So find the front of the foot, and then once I find the 3 stitches that are kind of centered in the back of this leg here, so I'm going to say these 3 look about centered to me, I'm going to line that up with my body, and then grab a stitch from the leg and the next stitch on my body, and there's 1 single crochet, 2 single crochet, and 3 single crochet, and then I'm just going to finish off this round with 4 single crochet. This is totally a trust the process type of pattern. And in this next round, we're going to be crocheting around the body, around the front legs, and then back around the body. So we're just going to go all the way around everything now, moving forward. So the first thing I'm going to do is just start the next round by making 1 single crochet and a decrease stitch 3 times. So 1 single crochet, and then a decrease stitch, and then I'm going to do that 2 more times. And then I'm going to make 4 single crochet. And then instead of going into this stitch next on my body, I'm going to come down to this next open stitch on my leg. So I'm just going from my body over here to the next open stitch on my front leg. And you want this to be a pretty tight stitch just so that there's not a gap in between where the body and the leg connect, so just make sure to pull that really tight. And I'm going to make 9 single crochet around this leg. So there's 1, okay, and then we're going to go back to the body for 1 single crochet. So I'm going to go back into the next open stitch on my body here and make 1 single crochet. And again, you want to make sure this stitch is really nice and tight, just so that there's not a big gap in between the leg and the body. Okay, and then we're going to do this again on this other leg. So I'm going to move back over to my other leg in the front. And the next open stitch I have on my leg is here. So I'm going to insert my hook into there. Again, make a really tight single crochet. And then we're just going to make another 9 single crochet around this front leg. So there was 1. Okay, and then we're going to jump back to the body, and this stitch right here is the next open stitch I have on my body. And I'm just going to finish this off with this round off with 4 single crochet. So going back into the body, I'm going to make a really tight single crochet, and then just 3 more. So 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm going to go ahead and just tuck in these little tails to get them out of the way. For the next round, I'm going to start by making 6 single crochet. And then 2 decrease stitches. And then I'm going to make 19 single crochet. And then I'm just going to finish off the round with 2 more decrease stitches. For the next round, I'm going to start by making 3 decrease stitches. And then 2 single crochet, and then another decrease stitch, and then I'm going to make 15 single crochet across the front. And then I'm going to finish off the round with another decrease stitch and 2 single crochet. Okay, and then for the next 2 rounds, I'm just going to do 2 rounds of 24 single crochet a round. I'm going to go ahead and do these rounds off camera real quick just for time's sake. But again, you're going to do 2 rounds of 24 single crochet a round, and then I'll be right back to show you what to do next. Okay, so I just finished my 2 rounds of 24 single crochet a round. And I'm gonna go ahead and add some stuffing into the body. And when you're stuffing, you really wanna make sure to fill out each hip and kind of the back area. Just make sure everything's filled out really good so you can see that shaping. And then when you're stuffing, you also want to make sure to push some more stuffing down into those arms to help them where they connected to the body. Okay, hopefully you can kind of start to see where we're going with this. Like I said, this is very much a trust the process type of pattern. For the next round, we're going to go ahead and just do 12 decrease stitches all the way around. Okay, so there's my 12 decrease stitches. And then I'm also going to make some shift stitches because we want this to be at the kind of back center of the body. We want our stitch marker to be at the back center of the body. So I'm gonna make, I think, just one extra single crochet, but you might have to do more depending on where your yarn is at. So again, that's just making sure that my stitch marker is now centered with the back of the body here. And then feel free to add a little bit more stuffing. We are gonna start working on the head, and the first round for the head is 12 increase stitches. So I'm just gonna make 12 increase stitches all the way around. For the next round, I'm gonna make 3 single crochet and then an increase stitch and repeat that 6 times to go all the way around. So 1, 2, 3 single crochet and then an increase. And then I'm gonna do that 5 more times. Okay, and then for this next round, again, it's super important that your stitch marker is lined up with the back center of the body. So if you need to make like shift stitches or anything like that before starting the next round, you can go ahead and do that now. I'm just gonna make 1 shift stitch. And then for the next round, I'm gonna start by making 6 single crochet. And then I'm gonna do 1 single crochet and an increase stitch 2 times. So 1 single crochet and then an increase, and I'm gonna do that 1 more time. And then I'm gonna make 4 single crochet, and then 2 increase stitches. then another 4 single crochet, and then I'm going to do 1 increase stitch and a single crochet 2 times. So increase, and then 1 single crochet, and then I'm just going to do that one more time. So another increase and 1 single crochet, and then I'm just going to finish off the round with 6 more single crochet. For the next round, I'm again just going to start by making 6 single crochet. And then I'm going to make 2 single crochet and an increase stitch and repeat that 2 times. So 1, 2, and then an increase. And then one more time. And then I'm going to make 5 single crochet. And then in these next 2 stitches, I'm going to do 3 single crochet in 1 into both stitches. So 1, and then into that same stitch, 2, and again into that same stitch. There's 3, and then I'm going to do that again in this next stitch. So another 3 single crochet all into that next stitch. 1, 2, and 3. And then we're going to do another 5 single crochet. And then just like we did on this other side, we're going to do 1 increase stitch and then 2 single crochet 2 times. So I'm going to do an increase stitch, and then 2 single crochet, and then I'm going to do that one more time, and then I'm just going to finish off the round with 6 more single crochet. Alrighty, and then for this next round, I'm just going to do 1 round of 44 single crochet around. So I'm going to go ahead and do this round off camera for time's sake, but again, you're going to do 1 round of 44 single crochet around, and then I'll be right back to show you what to do next. Okay, so I just finished my round of 44 single crochet around, and now we're going to start decreasing again the exact same way that we increased. So again, I'm just going to start with 6 single crochet, and then I'm going to do 2 single crochet and a decrease stitch 2 times. So 1 and 2 single crochet and then a decrease stitch, and then one more time, and then I'm going to do 5 single crochet, and then we're going to do what's called 3 single crochet 3 together. So with a normal decrease, you would go under the front loop of 2 stitches, but in this case we're going to go under the front loop of the next 3 stitches. So I have those front loops all on my hook, and I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3 of them just like if it was a normal decrease, just like that. And then we're going to do that one more time. So I'm going to go under the front loops of my next 3 stitches, yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops, and then yarn over and pull through just like a regular stitch. And then I'm going to do another 5 single crochet, and then I'm going to do a decrease stitch and 2 single crochet 2 times. So decrease, and then 2 single crochet, and then I'm just going to do that one more time, And then I'm just going to finish off the round with 6 more single crochet. For the next round, I'm going to start again with another 6 single crochet. And then I'm going to do one single crochet and a decrease stitch 2 times. So 1 single crochet and then a decrease stitch. And then I'm going to do that one more time. And then I'm going to do 4 single crochet. And then 2 decrease stitches. And then another 4 single crochet. And then I'm going to do a decrease and 1 single crochet 2 times. So a decrease stitch. And then 1 single crochet. And I'm going to do that one more time. And then I'm just going to finish off the round with 6 more single crochet. And then for the next 2 rounds, I'm going to do 2 rounds of 30 single crochet around. And I'm going to go ahead and do these rounds off camera, but again, you're going to do 2 rounds of 30 single crochet around, and then I'll be right back to show you what to do after that. Okay, so I just finished my 2 rounds of 30 single crochet around, and for this next round, we're going to be crocheting the ears into the head as we go around. So this is another time when it's really important that your stitch marker is centered at the back of the head, but if you need to take some stitches out or add a couple extra shift stitches, go ahead and do that now. For this next round, I'm just going to start by doing 5 single crochet. So I'm going to grab my first ear here, and just for reference, I have this tail coming out of the back of the ear from the slip knot that we made. And this tail here, this is at the bottom of the ear. So when I attach this, I'm going to go through 5 stitches on the ear and the head at the same time. So you want to find the 5 stitches that are kind of centered around the bottom of the ear here. I'm going to go through these 5 right here. And when I'm attaching this, I'm going to have this is maybe a little bit confusing, but I'm going to have this upside down. So I have the top of my ear right here, and I'm going to flip that upside down and line it up with the head like this. And like I said, we're going to do 5 single crochet through both the ear and the head. So I'm going to go through my first stitch on the ear, and then the next stitch on my head, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then I'm just going to make 10 single crochet back on my head. And then we're going to attach the other ear the exact same way. So I just have my ear, and I'm going to flip it upside down so that this bottom part of the ear is in line with my head, and I have my tail for my slip knot facing up. And I'm going to make 5 single crochet through both the head and the ear. And then to finish off the round, I'm just going to make 5 more single crochet. So the reason I attached the ears this way is so that as we continue to work around the head, we're going to kind of close up this middle part, and then the ears will sit up better and that pretty side will be facing outwards. For this next round, we're going to do 3 single crochet and then a decrease stitch and repeat that 6 times to go all the way around. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3 single crochet and then a decrease stitch. And then I'm going to do that 5 more times. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some stuffing and place my safety eyes before we get too far ahead on this. I do like to add stuffing before I place my safety eyes because I think it just helps to kind of fill out the shape and makes it easier for me to see where I want my eyes. But feel free to add your eyes first if you prefer that. So I have my head stuffed how I want it for now. And I'm going to go ahead and place my safety eyes. This right here is the kind of peak of my nose where that comes out. And I want my eyes to be up 1 row. So I'm going to count up 1 row and come over, and I'm going to have my eyes in between these 2 rows here. You do want to keep the eyes pretty far apart because we're going to do some shaping that kind of brings them in closer towards each other. So it looks like I want my eyes to be about 7 stitches apart. And once you're happy with the placement of your eyes, you can go ahead and just pop the backings on them. For the next round, we're going to continue decreasing. So I'm going to do 2 single crochet and a decrease stitch and repeat that 6 times to go all the way around. So 1 and 2 single crochet and then a decrease stitch. And I'm going to repeat that 5 more times. Okay, and then for the next round, I'm going to do 1 single crochet and a decrease and repeat that 6 times to go all the way around. So 1 single crochet and then a decrease stitch. And I'm just going to repeat that 5 more times. For the last round of the head, we're just going to do 6 decrease stitches, and feel free to go ahead and tuck a little bit more stuffing in there. And then we're going to go ahead and just tie off our yarn and close up this hole. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and close up this gap. So I have the tail that just left up here that I'm gonna thread onto my embroidery needle. And then to close up this gap, I'm just gonna go weave this kind of in and out of each one of these 6 stitches that are left. And then once I've gone through all of my stitches, I'm just going to pull this tight to close up that gap and then weave this tail into my head. And then you can go ahead and cut off the extra. And then next we're going to do a little bit of shaping to the face. So I'm going to take a scrap piece of that brown yarn and thread this onto my embroidery needle. And I'm gonna go in at the top inside corner of my eye here and have it come over to the top inside corner of the other eye. Pull that through, but make sure to leave a little tail over here on this side. And then I'm gonna go to the bottom inside corner of the same eye, over to the bottom inside corner of my other eye. And then I'm just going to tie these 2 ends together, and feel free to tie them as tight as you'd like. The tighter you tie them, the more it's going to kind of bring those eyes in and give the face a little bit more of a shape. And then I'm just going to cut off the extra yarn and weave these ends into the head. We're gonna use this tail here to kind of pin the ears upwards. And I guess you could leave your ears down if you wanted your bunny to have floppy ears, but I'm gonna pin mine up. So I'm just gonna take that tail left on the ear and thread it onto my embroidery needle. And then I'm just gonna grab a stitch from the head about a row over from the ear. And when I pull that up, you can see it just kind of holds that ear up. And then I'm just gonna tie off this yarn. And then you can just weave the ends into the head. And then I'm gonna repeat this again on the other ear. Okay, so this is already looking a lot more like a bunny, and we have our ears kind of sticking up now. The next thing I'm gonna do is you can leave your arms like this if you want, but I'm gonna just pin them down so that they sit together like that. So to do that, I'm just gonna take a real small scrap piece of my brown yarn and thread that onto my embroidery needle. And then I'm just gonna kind of hold these legs where I want them and grab a stitch from the body and the front leg where I want them to sit. And then when I tie those 2 ends together, it's just gonna hold that front leg in place. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and tuck in these ends and repeat this with the other front arm as well. Okay, so now you can see the arms just sit a little bit nicer on the front of the body. Next, I'm going to sew on our back feet. So I'm gonna grab one of my back feet and thread that tail onto my embroidery needle. And I'm just gonna kind of look at the bottom of my body here. Place this foot where I want it. I wanna make sure that from the side it looks how I want it as well. And then I'm just gonna make a couple of stitches to sew this into place. Alright, and then I'm just gonna tie off this yarn and weave the end into the body, and then repeat this on the other side with the other leg. The last couple details that we have left is just on the face. We're gonna add some little whites to go around the eyes and then a nose. So to make these little whites around the eyes, I'm just gonna take 2 little scrap pieces of white plush yarn. And I'm gonna thread the first one onto my embroidery needle. And what I'm gonna do is take this and insert it at the top center of my eye and have it come off somewhere onto the side of the head. And I'm gonna pull that through and pull it right off of my embroidery needle. And then rethread the yarn onto the other side. And I'm gonna insert this one into the bottom center of my eye and have it come out back to the side of the head. And then when I tie these together, that's just gonna create that little white detail around the eye. And then I'm gonna tie these 2 ends together and weave them into the head. And just make sure that you repeat this on the other eye as well. And then the last thing we're gonna do is just add a nose. So I have some medium weight pink yarn here. And I'm just gonna thread some of that onto my embroidery needle. And then insert this right around that peak of that nose. And I'm just gonna kind of loop this yarn around those few stitches a couple of times. And then once I'm happy with how this looks, I'm just gonna insert my yarn into the top center of the nose, right underneath where I've just embroidered that. And then I'm gonna go straight down a couple of rows, about like that. And this will be kind of like a mouth. And then I'm gonna go right back into that same stitch in the center of the nose and have my yarn come back out over here where we first inserted it. There we go. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and cut and tie my ends together and then weave them into the head. I actually think these are so cute. This is such a fun pattern. It works up really quickly, and if you do make this pattern, I would absolutely love to see your photos, and you can tag me on Instagram at Crochet with Kira. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.